a significant development in our ongoing effort to address drug interdiction, address drug cartels, and the scourge that is the opioid epidemic. What we need to reckon with is the fact that we are facing a major crisis. To put 2020 in perspective, the numbers are coming in, but at this point, the CDC is estimating on the order of 80,000 deaths across our nation of drug overdose. Around 66% of those are because of opioids, which is a deadly drug, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's prescription drugs, whether it's heroin. We are losing people. We are losing more people to drug overdose than we lost in the Iraq War and the Vietnam War combined. This is happening year over year. And in no other country in the world is this epidemic hitting the way it hits here. There are complex causes behind this. As I've talked about before, the prescription drug effort to push or turbocharge, as we addressed last week in settlement against McKinsey, has a critical role. Doctors overprescribed. We're pushing out these prescription pills. Often people start with these prescription pills and move on to heroin. Of late, however, the threat that is of grave concern to all of us is fentanyl, a synthetic substance that can be packaged and look like a prescription drug pill, but have wildly different dosing and be deadly. And that's what we were addressing in the matter that we're announcing today. A coordinated and collaborative effort that brought together federal, state, and local law enforcement in a strike force. Our special prosecutions team has done very important work here, working with the Arvada Police Department, working with the Adams County District Attorney, and working with the DEA here in Colorado, represented by Special Agent in Charge Reuter. This was a project that took almost 2 years from the beginning when we got a lead until what we're announcing today. This was an international drug trafficking network that trafficked not only fentanyl, but also heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. Often they would use motor vehicles with concealed compartments. And as they brought fentanyl onto our soil and distributed it onto our streets, they have fueled and contributed to an opioid epidemic and to the deaths I talked about earlier. What I want to underscore is that in 2020, we saw our nation's all-time high in drug overdoses. During the pandemic, we know that mental health challenges, we know substance use challenges have gotten worse, and we know that fentanyl is contributing to deaths. In this particular investigation, there were over 30 different search warrants that led to a range of searches of residences and vehicles. And a number of the vehicles had special created compartments to hide the drugs, and they were trafficked on our streets. There were a number of judicial authorizations to conduct wiretap interceptions, 77, to help us identify this criminal enterprise and to bring accountability and to take this network off of the board, as it were. We are now proceeding through our Colorado State Grand Jury. 64 different individuals have been indicted. And 12 of these individuals are charged with violating Colorado's Organized Crime Control Act. This reflects the fact that this was a criminal enterprise. And this is a challenge that we take very seriously. How do we dismantle the whole network? Too often, we might just address a lower level distributor, and way too often, it's the users themselves who are ending up in jail or prison. But here, it's the enterprise itself, and you're seeing pictures of what this enterprise was doing. Not only were they engaging in illegal drug trafficking, they also were engaging in money laundering. And we have 9 defendants charged with that crime. We were able to use sophisticated forensic investigations, and we've had investigators working hard to identify and track the money. And this is obviously a common refrain, which is you want to follow the money, and you want to find how drug trafficking money then gets deposited, withdrawn, how it's used, how it's transferred. And we were able to follow that chain and identify $931,000 in US currency, all of which was seized as proceeds of money laundering and drug trafficking. And we noted that a number of the defendants were engaging in specific transfers to known areas of cartel activity. We also noted they did use aliases that we were able to track down and follow. As you can appreciate, pulling off an investigation like this takes an extraordinary commitment. It takes resources, it takes collaboration. And here in Colorado, we are so fortunate to have the leadership of our special agent in charge of DA, Deanne Reuter. Let me turn over the microphone to you to share a bit about this important collaboration.
Thank you, AG Weiser. I appreciate the time to talk to everyone here today. What I want to highlight in this investigation is what we're seeing throughout the country, that many of these drug trafficking organizations who used to just deal in certain drugs, only following one drug path. This organization, with the collaborative efforts that we had here, was a polydrug organization. As AG Weiser pointed out, there was seizure of cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl, which was disguised to look like legitimate oxycodone pills. On the street, they call them M30s, and these M30s are pharmaceutical type drugs that are now being imitated by our cartels in Mexico to look like legitimate pharmaceuticals. The problem with these pills is it contains fentanyl, and fentanyl is a deadly and illicit drug. The way it is being manufactured in Mexico, the lethal dose of fentanyl is 2 milligrams. And when they're mixing these substances in Mexico, there is no scientific method. There is no way for them to tell what is in each pill. And that is why we're having so many overdoses in Colorado and throughout the United States. On the street, these fake oxycodone pills go for $20 to $30 per pill on the street. So the seizure that this case brought, the seizures that this case brought on the fentanyl pills are roughly worth, just the pills are roughly worth $2 million to the organization. So you can see why this is moving into our neighborhoods. The pills are also packaged and easier to cross the border than typical drugs, because most of the drugs we see, cocaine and things like that, are brick-like. You saw pictures of the bricks that were seized in this investigation. The pills can be concealed much easier than these substances. And these pills are causing a rise in overdose deaths across the US, as AG Weiser said. In the United States, they're estimating over 80,000 people overdosed in the United States. In Colorado, we're seeing the highest numbers in Colorado. In Arvada, who was a partner on this case, Arvada is seeing increased overdose deaths in their area currently. The city of Denver itself had over 350 overdose deaths just from January 1st to November 30th of this past year, and continue to rise as we wait toxicology reports. What I want to point out before I pass the microphone on is that what we're seeing in our laboratories with these fentanyl pills, 26% of the pills tested by our laboratories contain a fatal dose of fentanyl. 26%. That's 1 in 4 pills that a buyer buys on the street could be the one that kills them. I thank you for the time here, and AG Weiser, I pass it back to you.
Thanks so much. I understand that District Attorney Brian Mason's having some technical difficulties. He may not be able to join us, but I want to underscore that collaboration with that office was critical to this initiative. All right, now's the time when members of the media can ask questions. You've got 2 options. You can put it into a chat and I will read it and answer it. Or if you want to raise your hand, that's another option. But before we do that, as if appearing magically right on time. We do have our district attorney partner, Brian Mason, who I will yield the floor for a few words before the questions. Go ahead, Brian.
Forgive me, Attorney General Weiser, for being late. I had another meeting that I couldn't get out of, but I apologize, and it's a pleasure to be with this distinguished group. And I guess I'll just reiterate what I'm sure many of you have already said, and that is that I'm really proud of this partnership and proud that these distinguished law enforcement agencies have worked together on this important case. And getting drugs off the streets is something that we all agree on. And when we can do it like this, it makes our community safer. And when law enforcement, federal, state, and local can partner with one another, that makes the community safer too. So I'm proud of the work that's been done so far, and I'm really privileged to be a part of this with the rest of you.
With that, I know we've got a number of our media who are here who may want questions answered. So again, put them in the chat or just raise your hand and I can call on you to ask a question, whatever you prefer. Or I can just ask our two fellow panelists questions. All right, I'll start with a question for my fellow panelists and we'll see if our team media warms up. For both of you, we talked about collaboration. I'd like to drill down a little bit. How is it that here in Colorado, we're able to have this effective sharing of resources and why does it make a difference? So for both of you, how do we do it and why does it make a difference? Special Agent in Charge, Reuter, what's your thought on this?
I've worked in other places in the United States. I feel like our partnerships here with all of the resources that we have here work together better than in other places because we seem to have limited resources here. And I think the joining our resources together works better for everybody for our shared missions.
District Attorney Mason, what's your thought on this topic? You've been in law enforcement as formerly, I'm not sure what the exact title was, but sort of a number two Chief deputy. Mm-hmm. Now here you are as the lead. What makes collaboration work so well here in Colorado?
Honestly, as a native of Colorado, I consider myself a native. I was born in Germany, but came here when I was 2. I think it's part of the Colorado spirit. The state of Colorado and the spirit of this state is one of collaboration, particularly when it comes to things like this. And it has never mattered, frankly, which party was in which office when it comes to trying to keep our communities safe. And so we're able to collaborate across county boundaries, across federal, state, and local jurisdictions, because we're all headed towards the same goal, and that's making Colorado safe and making it a better place. And so I really do believe that the Colorado spirit is part of what makes this collaboration possible.
And Blair Miller has a good follow-up question, which I will answer, and then maybe Special Agent in Charge Reuter can follow up, which is, you mentioned the DA's involved, but then you mentioned that there's Colorado law and Colorado grand jury process. That is a special testament to the collaboration. It is not always the case that federal government agencies work with state agencies and allow the charges to be brought in state court. This is a state grand jury we're talking about. It is a big deal that we have a DA partner here who isn't doing what some of us in state and local government here is bigfooting. And so I just want to give a big shout out to the culture and to the tradition and to the commitment of the DEA working with us here in Colorado, allowing us to pursue charges under our state law, which we're able to then use effectively to get accountability. So thank you for that. And if you want to comment on that, I think that is a notable element that Blair highlighted about this matter.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. Yes, we do. We work with our state and local partners all the time. Partnerships is a big part of what everyone does. The federal government, not every case can go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, as I talked about earlier. Limited resources all around have this this issue with having limited resources. So one of the unique things about this case is our Nevada PD and our strike force worked together in the 17th Judicial District with the DA's office and the Attorney General's office due to the scope of this investigation. And that's why you see state charges here instead of federal charges. That's why you see the DA's office and the AG's office involved in this investigation.
We got a good follow-up question, which is, can you go over all these numbers again? There was a lot that you mentioned, and that's because this is complicated. So let me just go over a few high-level numbers. 77 separate wiretap interceptions, 30 search warrants, including 16 searches of residences, 13 searches of vehicles. 64 separate individuals were indicted by the Colorado State Grand Jury. 12 of those were indictments for violations of the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act. 9 individuals were indicted for money laundering. The amount of money that was seized was $931,000. And this obviously took a long time. Someone asked a question that I'll see if I can get the answer to. It started in May 2019, but the other question I'll try to get an answer to is, when did it go to the grand jury? And that's a good question. Another number worth mentioning is 77,000. I think this is something our special agent Charles mentioned. Counterfeit oxy pills that contained fentanyl, 250 pounds of meth, and the grand jury process started October 2019. So the investigation started in March, and then the grand jury started, 6-ish months thereafter. We also need to mention 60 pounds of heroin was also seized. So this was a long-standing process that required patience. And this was obviously made harder by being in a pandemic. Allison Sherry says, so is this a federal, state, and local investigation? And are all 66 individuals indicted from Colorado? And was the money all confiscated from Colorado? So let's try to answer those separate questions. Yes, this is a coordinated investigation involving the federal DEA, the state attorney general, and the Arvada Police Department and the 17th Judicial District. All of these indictments are of individuals being indicted here in Colorado. And I believe the number will get you a confirmation. It's either, I think it's 64, but it's 64 people. It's worth noting they're indicted here in Colorado, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily Colorado residents per se. And we have the ability to indict people here in Colorado who have inflicted harm in Colorado, even if they may be residing elsewhere. And then as for the money, I believe the money all was confiscated here in Colorado as part of this operation. Is that right, Special Agent Charge?
That's correct. All the assets, the vehicles, the guns, and which we haven't mentioned yet, the firearms that were seized in this case, and the U.S. currency was seized in Colorado.
Special Agent Charge, Ruder, we got another good question for you, which is, it sounds like these drugs traveled all around Colorado, even though they're being prosecuted here through a state grand jury. Is that true that it's all around Colorado? And then are there other states that are affected by the drugs we're talking about today?
Well, the specific case that we're talking about today is the reason you see the DA and the AG involved is due to the geographic scope. So yes, there were seizures outside of Adams County, there were seizures in other parts, and that's why you see the collaborative partnership effort of prosecution. But this investigation does not stand alone. This is happening all throughout the United States. This is just one example of what the cartels are doing, getting into polydrug distribution networks. In this particular case, I can say the tip came from our Las Vegas partners in Nevada. So it is not just being distributed here. It is not just being trafficked here. It is coming from other places and to other places.
And I think it's widely reported Mexico is the origin of the vast majority. Sometimes we've also heard China exporting these fentanyl-based products as well. Again, the scourge is hitting all across Colorado, all across the United States. It is a credit, and this is a question that was asked, that the 17th Judicial District and the Nevada PD saw the value of collaborating. The statewide grand jury has the ability to pursue a range of crimes, and we've got expertise in our office in our special prosecution section on the financial money laundering crimes we talked about, on the Colorado COCA law, which governs organized crime. So this is a great effort. Maybe I'll let District Attorney Mason talk about that. For some people who know the 17th Judicial District, obviously you've looped in us at the state level. Anything else you want to say about how we all work together in Colorado?
Sure, I'll say a couple things. First of all, drug trafficking is an international problem, and yet it is also very much a local problem here in Colorado. The drug crisis is devastating many of our communities, if not all of them, across the state, and certainly here in the 17th Judicial District, which is Adams and Broomfield. And I, again, just want to compliment my colleagues who were all involved in this, because the collaboration really does allow us to make the community safer and to try to take down these cartels as best we can. Anybody who has followed drug trafficking for years knows that it's a massive, massive problem, and they just keep throwing drugs at the problem, even as we keep working to get them off the streets. But having cases like this where we can collaborate really does make an impact. In terms of where you bring charges, in a case like this, which does span more than one jurisdiction and is obviously part of this collaboration with the feds and with the Attorney General's office, you still have to venue it somewhere. And so the case is being venued here in the 17th Judicial District, and we're proud to take it and to be involved.
And for those wondering, venued can function as a verb in that context, although generally only used by criminal prosecutors. I'm sorry, I should clarify. When I say venue, you've got to pick a jurisdiction in which the case has to be filed and prosecuted. And I'm just teasing, and it was appropriate because there was a lot of involvement from the Arvada PD, from your office, DA Mason, and some of the higher level defendants actually did reside in Adams County. So it was appropriate that you raised your hand, and we appreciate that. A question for Special Agent in Charge Reuter: did any of the investigation and actions happen in Southern Colorado in particular? And if so, can you say where?
I do not know that the answer to that specific question. We did have links to other parts of Colorado besides just Adams County, but specifically, I don't have the answer to that question today.
I don't either. We can see if we can get back to you. We do believe that there were some mid-level bosses in Colorado Springs in particular, where there's criminal trafficking, but we'll try to get back some more specifics if we can. The press release is out, by the way, which has all the data that I went over earlier, which I know is a lot to digest. Another question, again, Special Agent in Charge Reuter: is there a process for looping in Mexican authorities, and did that happen here at all?
There is a process. We have good partnerships also with foreign countries. But today we're talking about Colorado and what happened here in Colorado. And I just feel that we need to highlight what is happening here.
Another question about the nature of this action. You mentioned that these are higher up, the leaders of the enterprise itself. Is there any detail you can give about how high ranking these individuals are and why that's significant?
Well, when you look at the charges that were filed by your office, we're looking at the COCA charges. Those normally go to the higher ranking individuals that are the control centers of the organizations. Those are the conspiracy charges. I don't have the ability to say or rank how high up, but this organization, you look at 64 defendants that were indicted by your office. There is you take the entire organization. the reason we're here today is to talk about, we took the entire organization. The investigation culminated here with the indictment of 64 individuals to take out this group together. We wouldn't have announced it if we were only taking out a portion of the organization.
And just to underscore that point, 12 individuals were indicted under the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act. And those are leaders of a conspiracy to engage in a criminal enterprise. So that gives you a little bit of an answer there. Lucy Haggard asked that question. All right, I know I've given you a lot to digest, including the press release. We really appreciate your attention getting out this story. This is obviously a critical priority that all of us share. Any final questions? If not, I will, okay, we do have one coming in from Blair, which is, what sort of dent does this make and how widespread is it? We took out one organization. We all know this is not the only organization engaged in a criminal enterprise and a drug cartel. We will continue to be vigilant in this area. The question that Blair asked is, how widespread is it? I meant it at the outset that we are seeing more deaths rising from fentanyl and more deaths from drug overdose and opioids than before. So this problem is getting worse. It is widespread all across Colorado. And the challenge, again, as I mentioned, a lot of times people may start prescription drugs that they get their hands on, and then they look for more drugs. And when they look for them on the street, so to speak, what they often will be purchasing are not the real drugs that they've used before, but the synthetic fentanyl made to look like those drugs, except, as explained very well by Special Agent in Charge Reuter, the dosing is totally variable, which raises the risk of an overdose. And that's why this is a particular scourge that we're addressing. Anything you want to add to that? It's an important why question. Why does this matter? How big a deal is this?
I'll just add to the question, how widespread is the fentanyl problem? It is statewide, nationwide, worldwide. And we see it in Adams County and in Broomfield counties, and we see it all across Colorado. And it's one of the biggest problems that we face in terms of drug prosecutions and trying to attack the drug problem in our country.
And I can add to that, AG Weiser, that as District Attorney Mason said, it is a nationwide problem. If you look at the CDC health advisory that came out in December of 2020, there's a reason that health advisory came out. It's not just about Colorado. Yes, we're here to talk about Colorado today, but this is a nationwide problem. Looking at the advisory, even the 10 Western states where we're at is seeing a dramatic increase in fentanyl abuse and fentanyl overdoses, including fatal overdoses, has increased greatly in the last year. And that's the message that I would like to get out today. This is a great investigation, great partnerships, but we need to make the public aware of the dangers of what is happening with fentanyl abuse and these fake counterfeit pills that are coming from Mexico.
And let me offer my closing thought on this, which is we need a range of tools given the extent of this challenge and crisis. Drug interdiction and going after drug cartels, like we are talking about today, is a core part of this. So is raising awareness and drug prevention efforts. So are efforts to reduce the harm, like Narcan distribution, so that as people are in the midst of a potential drug overdose, we save lives. So is drug treatment and drug recovery. In last week's announcement, our action against McKinsey that we in Colorado led brings $10 million to Colorado to support our education, prevention, drug treatment, drug recovery programs. We are seeing this crisis in our criminal justice system, in our communities. We need action, and we are committed in our office to leading on this important issue.
As are we in the 17th Judicial District, which is why this partnership, again, is such a success story and also something to really treasure going forward.
It's an honor to work with you both. Special Agent in Charge, Reuter, we're so lucky to have you here in Colorado, and thanks for your leadership and your team's hard work on this. I know this effort culminates a lot of work from a lot of people. We're not going to name any names, but we're just going to tell you all, you are dedicated public servants making a difference, and we appreciate you.
Great. Thank you, both of you, for having me here today. And again, I look forward to continuing our great partnerships and the Strike Force Group and the Attorney General's Office, and of course, the 17th Judicial District. We look forward to working on more of these together.
As do we. Thank you to all of you.
Thanks, everybody.